Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking a bit today for families of OCD sufferers to start with, talking a little bit about what they can do to help their loved ones that are going through OCD. Now, the first thing with OCD is it strikes without warning. So somebody might suddenly start suffering with OCD when they are 17, 18 out of the blue, and it can become suddenly very chronic, very fast. And in that moment, they don't know what to do. They don't know in that situation what's going on with them, and then they're obviously very anxious and very distressed, so their family very quickly is going to be very concerned. And then it's usually up to their mum or dad to find them help, to find them therapy, to help get them better. And that is a situation where it's a situation of desperation for the family often in that case, because they're very concerned that the person could be suicidal, person could be very, very depressed, and the family is having to then educate themselves very quickly on OCD and what's involved with OCD. And then they tend to move from therapist to therapist, trying to find out what's going on, and then they're still complaining and saying that nothing's working. And usually this, if they're young or older, involves them crying and screaming to their parents of, please find me another therapist that helps me. You don't know what this is like. This is terrible, and so on and so on and so on. So it then becomes in the hands of the mum or the dad to find this therapist, and they're then instantly going through this journey of OCD themselves, trying to get their son or daughter better. And that becomes a problem for them very quickly, and something that they then feel very lost. Nobody understands. The therapists don't understand. Long waiting times, because it's usually organised very badly by the mental health systems where they're based. Long waiting times, therapists that don't call back, long waiting lists for specialists in OCD, and so on and so on. And all in the meantime, the person suffering is crying, screaming. Really, if it's new to them, they're going to be. They'll feel like their whole life has suddenly changed overnight, like that, from where before they were fine, or it might have been building, but often it can be very sudden. And in that situation, then the parents are having to educate themselves very, very quickly on OCD. So that's the first part, the difficulty that they're in, and having to research and find somebody who is very knowledgeable on OCD to help them get better from the suffering that they're currently involved in. So that's the first part. And the second part is that the sufferer then will be asking for reassurance, usually a lot. It might be in the form of medical testing, might be in the form of asking if they're a good person or so on to the parent. And then what normally happens is the parent sees the fear and wants to calm their child, so they then engage in the reassurance cycle, which starts off and then tends to continue for a long time because they just want to calm them down. And then the child will usually be begging the parent for that reassurance, the same as a drug addict would for a drug. And then it's up to the parent to refrain from giving that. And that's a difficulty for a lot of parents because they don't want to refrain from that, so they collude with OCD in itself. OCD wants to keep going with the reassurance, and so they get into a cycle of doing that. So they need to be very strict with that. Now, let me make this very clear. That is not a parent who it doesn't want their son or daughter to get better. They do, but they can't stand seeing them suffering. So they do engage very much so in the reassurance and the compulsions, keeping that going, keeping their compulsions going. This might be in reassurance in the form of, yes, you're a good person. No, you would never do that. It might be in the forms of doing their washing so they don't have to wash, because they're scared of contamination-related OCD. It might be in relation to forms of cleaning the house and checking so that they don't have to venture around the house, the stairs, the places where the bins, the laundry room, wherever the laundry is carried out, things that could be triggering for contamination. So there's all variations of that. So for families, they've got to be very strict with handing out these kind of reassurance-like things, being cautious that they're not doing too much of that. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is the second thing. And then the other thing is with families, they need to come from a position of compassion. It's very easy to think OCD sufferers are doing this to themselves, but I can assure you they are not doing this to themselves. It's the nature of the disorder. That's how it operates, okay? So it will operate in that way. OCD sufferers very much don't want to be feeling like that. They would do anything to not be in that position, but the disorder keeps them in that position. I think it's extremely important to come from a position of both of tough love and a position of compassion. The reason being that if you are too sort of soft with the approach, which we see with many therapists around the world, and we see with many people that are involved with trying to help people get better from OCD, if you take too soft a stance, OCD is going to run circles around them. So you need to put in boundaries. You need to have a reasonably tough love stance. But you at the same time need to be coming from a position of compassion, because it's very easy to get into a cycle of thinking that leaving the OCD sufferers doing it to themselves, and then it's very easy to sort of take a step back and then sort of leave them to solve their own problem, which is a part of it, but at the same time you want to be helping and assisting them because they can feel very lost and alone. The thing with OCD, it's very easy for them to function, and they can be functioning, they could be on holiday, they can be doing all different kinds of things, but whilst they're doing that, they can be suffering a great deal underneath the surface. I often say it's a bit like, say for example, if you imagine that with suicide, people who are suicidal, they can often be smiling at a party and enjoying themselves, dancing and everything, and then commit the suicide within a day or two, or even that night. It doesn't present itself in a way that you imagine it. People aren't sitting holding their head, crying, and then the suicide. Of course that happens, but many times it's hidden. You wouldn't notice it. Okay, so it's the same as with anxiety. You can see people functioning at such a high level. I have people come to me all the time that you would have no idea at all that they were suffering from severe anxiety. No idea at all. So you do need to keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out on your loved ones if they are suffering. Give them distance, give them space, but at the same time, don't. Although you're giving them distance and giving them space, keep an eye on them. Keep checking how they're doing with their therapy and how they're getting through things. Make sure that they're doing their homeworks, that they're keeping up with the therapy, that they're following along with what's needed, because very easily they can not be doing that, and it's very important to monitor that. You need to have a plan, a goal plan, an action plan that they're partaking in, because if they don't do that, if they don't engage in an action plan, it very quickly gets completely out of control. Take it, for example, like on holiday. So obviously it's August right now, on a holiday, somebody could easily feel that there's two different things they can feel. Sometimes when holidays are coming up, people feel far worse. Okay, OCD sufferers think a holiday is coming up. I want this holiday to be great, so therefore I am going to. Therefore, I know it's coming up. I don't want it ruined by OCD. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hope and control and try and fix everything in my head right now for OCD. Because if I don't fix everything right now before my holiday, I will get into a position of not being able to enjoy my holiday to the fullest. Now, the reverse can happen. You can go on holiday and feel very relaxed and feel like, oh, okay, this is a really relaxing time. I feel the best ever. I just need more time relaxing, and then I'll be better. And then they can plead with the parents often, please, can I have more time? Maybe I'll quit my job. Maybe I'll give up going to college at the moment, and then the OCD will settle down. So we've got all those kinds of things. Well, OCD doesn't settle down like that, all right? That's not how it operates. Usually it grows like a goldfish to its surroundings. So the more you cut back, the more it tends to grow. So OCD tries to suck our life bit by bit back till we're not doing much at all, usually just sitting on the couch or watching TV. So it's important for parents to put in boundaries there to keep the sufferer moving forward, so that they're engaging in normal life, they're functioning, they are carrying on with the things that mean things to them, school, so on. Don't expect it to when you cut back that it will decrease. It tends to usually increase. I think that's really important. Another thing is sleep. People often, OCD sufferers will often try and escape suffering by going to sleep longer. Sleep is like the cousin of death. They're asleep for longer because that's a way for them to get out of the suffering. But the problem with that is by doing that, they are actually they're actually missing out on life, and then it becomes a bad life structure in terms of it's a sort of a life structure where we get lower energy and waking up later and later and not functioning more and more, and that becomes a problem more and more and more. And I see that all the time, or versions of that, going to bed extremely late, getting up really late, especially when they've got sleep problems related, all different things like that. So that needs monitoring life structure by parents, monitoring life structure, keeping people busy, but because sitting at home not doing things is obviously a grounds for OCD to flourish, but then not being so busy that trying to run away from it. So bringing it for the ride rather than distraction. I think that's really important. I think it's really important to have a healthy life structures as well. From a point of view with people I work with, I've got on one of these Fitbit things for monitoring sleep. I use them often for monitoring sleep with OCD sufferers that have problems sleeping, and what I do with them is I monitor it remotely to see how their sleep is instead of them seeing it, so that we can see how that's improving. And what we normally notice is that once people start relaxing in the evening, getting a better bedtime structure, that they learn to lie in bed where they can't sleep instead of getting up and rushing around, breaking down the fears of not being able to sleep and the fears of being sluggish the next day and so on, that we get a sleep routine back. Just sleep routine alone, getting a proper sleep structure in there, not a structure that we feel I've got to get everything in place before I go to bed, but just a healthy structure makes a wonder of difference. Life structure is so important. I'm constantly changing life structures of people that I work with all the time to make them healthier, to get people into a better position where they can move forward because of the life structure that they're now in. It's very easy for life structure to quickly fall out of sync because OCD takes the reins. OCD is always trying to jump to the front of the queue to take over all your priorities and put itself number one of the list. So that's important for parents, because parents will often be battling children trying to cancel holidays, trying to get out of social functions because of OCD, and it's important about putting those boundaries in. Obviously, as they grow up, it's different. Then things change. But when they're younger, it's very much a responsibility of the parent to implement those things to help along the healthy life structure that's needed for OCD recovery. Now let's just have a quick look if there's any specific questions on here relating. Any questions you want to ask in relation to families with OCD, ask those here and I'll cover those now, as I'll probably end up speaking about families as the main sort of content of this sort of subject today on this Instagram live. I've waited a year for a psychiatrist and finally got a call back recently. Yeah, you're gonna be waiting long times often with therapy. Waiting lists is a big problem. It's one of the probably one of the big causes of a lot of suicides, because people feel completely alone. Alone is one of the main things, and feel like there's no hope, or they can never reach anyone. It's a big problem. People often at their most critical points can't reach out for help. It's very sad, but hopefully that will be something that is improving. My dad can't get his head around it. I say reassurance isn't the answer, and he says if someone is feeling that way or fearful of whatever, you're going to reassure them. I try to explain, but doesn't get it. A lot of parents aren't going to get it, and they don't need to get it. You don't need their approval for your own recovery. It's not the easiest thing to get unless you suffer from it. Try and help them understand as best you can, but you do not need them to understand it fully. Recovery is dependent on you getting you better and accepting that they do not need to know and do not need to understand. Need guidance on how to help the OCD sufferer. Well, that is exactly what I'm covering here, because it doesn't get enough coverage. We'll be going to be doing a lot more of these family OCD Instagram lives, so that families can become really aware of what's involved in OCD recovery. So it's not so much a situation of the person feeling alone with nobody understanding it. How do you override the urge to do a compulsion? Well, I think the first thing to think about, which is, I'm covering mainly family stuff, but I will cover that now, is the thing with compulsions is this. You're in a position where with basically OCD compulsions, they're the thing that keep the cycle hugely going. Okay, so if you're engaging in compulsions all the time, the problem there is that's going to be a situation where you're keeping the cycle going, and you've got to take it deadly serious. You've got to say, right, I really want to get better from OCD. It means everything to me. I'm so fed up of going down this cycle. I want my life back. And when you take that attitude and you really want that, those compulsions you're going to see are very much not necessary in what you're trying to do and achieve. So cutting out compulsions will happen when you are extremely determined to get your life back. You do not want to be walking that path anymore. At that point is where you're going to notice the real change. And the problem with compulsions, they always appear like, oh, this is harmless. This compulsion won't, this is just one little bit of reassurance. Trust me, they're not. Because every one of those little reassurances adding up and adding up and adding up, okay? And they keep the cycle going. Reassurance provides a short-term solution, but it's not a long-term solution. And it quickly changes and loses its power. So it becomes shorter and shorter and shorter till you can only last a few seconds or not at all. And that's basically what happens. My boyfriend gets frustrated when I ask him to do things in a certain way, like wash his hands, etc., and calls me controlling, when really in my head I'm trying to keep him safe. You've got to hold your ground. It's very much a tough love approach with OCD recovery, and you're going to have to hold your ground with it. And that might mean he might be frustrated, but it is for his own good. And we don't cut out compulsions cold turkey. We cut them down a bit down, but then there are positions of cold turkey that we go to too. It's very, very important that we maintain that, because it is for their own benefit, and it does need to be kept like that. The same as with drug addicts. Somebody is addicted to drugs, they're going to be pleading for it all the time. It's only when you're really strict and hold it off, then they're going to get better. All my husband wants to do is sleep. He can sleep for days straight. Don't know how to help him get out of that cycle. Well, a good place to get him started is to get him looking at this page, because the whole point here is to educate people so they can see about the hope in recovery and see that there is a situation where they can get better. Because sleep is not going to lead to recovery, because sleeping is basically, it's just like being dead. All that's happening is you're not there. So you're not learning anything new. You're not gaining anything to move you forward. It's exactly the same position as you were before you went to sleep. So that's not going to help. Sleeping has some short-term benefits where it makes you feel better by being asleep and refreshing your body, but it doesn't when you're trying to escape life. That's the problem. And we've only got limited time on this life too. So although we want to escape the suffering, we're also sabotaging and cutting out our life alive, the days alive. So great places to point him to this page so we can start having a look at his OCD, and he can start learning things about his OCD. Are there any books or articles for families to help them understand OCD that you recommend? Well, I'm currently writing a book on OCD, which has taken me a very long time, and it will definitely have sections in it, which I haven't put in there yet, but is going to be one of the things that I'm going to be adding on how families can understand OCD. Whether or not I bring out a specific book for families on understanding OCD might happen, because obviously it's something that is needed. But these Instagram lives, in the meantime, will be covering in great detail about families and how to understand OCD for partners, for sisters, brothers, mums, dads, everyone. I want to help my teen, but he won't ever talk to me about his OCD. He says he's fine, but you can tell he's not. Well, often if the themes are things that OCD tends to pick, things that are very personal, things that are very scary to an individual. Now, if you imagine a teenager is growing up and is experiencing things in life for the first time, and he's not aware of that, of other people as experiences of these things, be it of a sexual nature or harm natures, any of these things. And so he's not going to want to talk about that necessarily if it's on those subjects. It can be very hard for somebody like myself, even when talking to people that have OCD and don't want to disclose their fear, be it POCD, harm OCD, or so on. They don't often want to disclose that. So I have to venture out myself and explain, this is what I had, these are the thoughts I had. And then they go, well, thank you, because you shared that, now I feel safer to share this. Now, I've often posted here on Instagram about the importance of therapists making the first move. If you don't make the first step with people with a lot of of OCD they don't say. So it's vital that you do, so they realise, it's okay. So as a parent, if they don't want to talk, then they can talk to a therapist or somebody like myself, because it's by doing that, what you're doing is they don't have to disclose it to your parents. It's like no one's going to want to discuss personal matters like that with their mother or father, so that's not going to happen. But at the same time, he may still want to venture out about a lot of these things because he might not be concerned. So you want to show, look, you can mention anything to me. I'm always here to help, and come across with that approach. But if not, then that suggestion, which he'll need anyway to get better. Okay, so my son has contamination OCD and his main compulsion is avoidance. How can I help him take the leap? He's so amazing, it's hard to see him keep his world so small. That's just to finish off on that point from the last person. It's vital that everyone who is suffering from OCD is getting the relevant help. If they're trying to do it on your own, is very, very difficult. So it's very important they reach out for help. So with contamination OCD and the main compulsion being avoidance, it's to how you can make him take the leap. It's tricky as a parent, because they're not going to necessarily want to venture out, and it often comes they listen to someone like myself, pushing them forward to do it much more than they would a direct family member. But you can really show them the importance of, and again show them this page, and also show them how important it is to take that first step to take their life back, why this is something that they need, why this is what is going to determine the quality of their life, why this is the path to OCD recovery. Avoidance doesn't lead to OCD recovery. It does not do that. So we want to really be encouraging facing fears, being brave, going for it, because it's a hell of a lot better than living a life like that. Do you know roughly when your book will be out? Well, it's not going to be out anytime just soon at the moment, because I've worked with a huge number of people, and as you probably know, I do a large amount of writing on all the social media and different things, and so it's something that I'm working on as a sort of a slightly longer term process. But I know how much people want to read that book, and so I'm going to try and speed things up. But it's going to take me a while, because I'm trying to put that book's going to encompass many years of OCD. It's not going to be a simplistic, just a very short book like often a lot are. It's going to be simple in terms of what's needed to be done, but it's going to include a hell of a lot of content, so it's going to take a little while still, I'm afraid. How do you explain to people the right way without coming across as really weird about not doing stuff in your house, such as take off your shoes, don't use the bathroom, etc.? I find these trigger me. Well, you can explain. You don't need their approval, so you can just go out and tell them that, and if they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. But the problem with that is what you're telling them is keeping the cycle of reassurance going. So we actually want to be opting out of that by not doing these things and not getting them to do these things, because that's the vital thing needed for OCD recovery. Very hard to talk about it with family if it revolves around them too. In relation to OCD fears, yes, that's exactly why I'm highlighting speaking to people like myself or speaking to therapists, because otherwise it can be very tricky for them to say, oh yeah, by the way, Mum, I've got thoughts about killing you. That could easily be misinterpreted. How to get brother to help in OCD recovery when he is unmotivated and reluctant from past experience, but worried he'll commit suicide in future, but doesn't want to turn this into controlling compulsion. So can you just make this clear? Does your brother have OCD as well, or is this in relation to your own OCD? Just to clarify that. So I think from all these things here that you can see with families, families do feel very much alone with the OCD recovery journey. Okay, they do feel very, very, very much alone. But you are one of many families. And I will be introducing a family kind of group support soon, like versions of the WhatsApp, and so that we can do group chats for families so they don't feel alone, seeing the journey with other mums and parents. I think this is what's definitely needed. I think that when you're dealing with OCD, it's easy to look around you, friends, family, other families, and think, God, they're not going through anything. But trust me, they are. Other families are going through other complications, other things that you don't see and you don't know. So it's very easy to think all human beings are rolling along without an issue just because they don't talk to you directly. But trust me, there is many things going on. OCD is not in a position like it used to be. We're in a place where there is a lot of awareness and a lot of things due to the likes of social media and, say, this account account, for example. There's a lot of information that's available to people with OCD now, so that you can look and see things what other people are going through. In the past, that would have not been the case. We're at the forefront of sharing information fast, quickly, and so people can hear their stories from one part of the world to another. So I think if you're stuck with OCD and you're a family, you can researching stuff yourself, looking up about it is vital, because a lot of times although it's important for the individual who's suffering to take their recovery responsibility themselves, because it's them who gets them better, the coaches, the therapists, they guide, they don't walk it. You have to walk it. However, often when someone is depressed and not walking it, not doing that, family does have to intervene to help lift them up, and then we can promote them to moving on to taking responsibility for themselves. But at the beginning, it's often reaching out is what is needed. My parents think it's a mind over matter situation. You can always control your thoughts. As someone who's trying to recover, it makes it difficult. Well, that's certainly not true, but it's very much thought of. People often think that, especially from a slightly older generation. Not in reality possible at all, as we know from OCD, that you can't do that controlling. You can't just snap out of it. You can't just put on a brave face. You can't do any of that. It doesn't work like that. If it did, it would be very easy. We'd just tell people to do that and they would just snap out of it. It doesn't operate like that. Guys, this is only going to be a brief Instagram live today, but I thought I would cover the family section to get that covered. Any more questions that you want to ask me, message me. I can't answer individual questions. I can only do that in the coaching sessions, but anything that you want me to cover in these Instagram lives specifically, you can message me and highlight that to be covered in Instagram live, and I will get those things covered. Thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in, and I will see you next time.